Well, welcome back everybody. This was an old project I worked on and thought it'd be a good one to kick off 2022 and do a little voiceover work on this Ford 900. Bought the tractor from a guy down the road. It was not running the best, did some fuel system work on it, ran fine, and got it sold to a guy who was going to restore it. Had one when he was growing up. And always heard about the Ford tractors. I'd never really been around any. This was my first experience. And I see why people like them. It was a really good tractor. It looked good. Had a good sound to it. My biggest complaints, though, is common with a lot of the older utility tractors, really. And I'm going to go ahead and call this one a utility, even though it's still tricycle. It had the low exhaust on it, which I thought looked good, so I put that back on. But my biggest complaints are the pedals on it, and I'll get to that in a minute. It's got a dual stage clutch, which that took a little bit of getting used to, that in the up and down shift pattern. But once got the hang of it, it was pretty fun to drive. And it came with power steering on it, and didn't have to do anything to it. It just worked, it was great. And my dad had talked about the shifters on these things, and it took me a few days of running it around to finally get the hang of it. But I've grown up with the more modern tractors, and my antique experience was mostly old two-cylinder John Deeres. The original exhaust that was on it was a car muffler and flex pipe all the way out the back, and then it hooked like the back of a truck out to the left-hand side behind the tire. It was funky, but it did work. And being a tricycle, I thought it had a really nice look to it. That's my complaint about the pedals, is what I just showed there. Your feet wind up underneath them, which to me was kind of ungainly to try to get on them to get it stopped, but it worked, got used to it. Just driving around, it was comfortable enough. And I know that they were working with small tractors at the time. I just think it would have been better if they could have moved the pedals farther forward. But knowing the history of Ford and how he was, the original designs working with Ferguson on up, they really didn't change much. And that's true with a lot of tractors. You look at a John Deere B to a John Deere 530, there's not much difference. The tractor, though, driving around the barn lot was great. The carburetor needed a little bit more tuning, but it was livable. And I don't think I actually used it for anything. I went to put some 3-point implements on it, and my pins were the wrong size, and they wouldn't fit. The carburetor, like I said, was a little iffy, so you see it's basically running full throttle all the time to keep it running. But again, thought it was a good looking tractor, had a good sound to it. If you were just wanting something to play around with, they're great. Guys in the club pull them, and they do really good once you get enough weight to hold them down. And, it was a pretty easy flip to fix a few of the problems. Battery box had to be patched up. One tire, the valve core was bad. I thought it was a tube, just put a valve core in it and lined the wheels up, and once put a 7-bolt in, it was a great tractor to drive around on. It would start and run real easy. So if you're looking for a decent tractor, recommend this or one of the variations, 940, 950, 960 they had. They're definitely worth the money for a collector tractor and one that you're going to play around with a little bit. Not my first pick, but I've come to figure out a lot of the older utility tractors I'm just not a big fan of. There's a couple, but my biggest complaints are how the seat and everything is situated. It just makes it feel kind of cramped, kind of hard to get off and on if you're going to be using it a lot. So that's my review of the Ford 900, and you can go down a rabbit's hole of all the different models. This one here, this one being a 4-speed, it's a 940, which is kind of the base model. The utility version would be an 800. Parts are really easy to get. I got everything from Tractor Supply for it, and go online for Ford tractor parts, they're everywhere. So definitely a good project tractor for somebody wanting something they can get into pretty easy. And there's enough of them out there, they're still relatively cheap enough that they can be found good shape and be a good starter tractor for someone wanting to get in the hobby. So I recommend it for a hobby tractor, but for my daily use, there's others I find more comfortable and better to run.